Hey there guys, so I want to thank you for joining today's live stream. So with today's live stream, as far as any announcements, I don't really have much to say at the moment. I've still been working on giving you guys the best content possible and trying to sort of stay focused on, providing you guys with more value and everything of that nature. So I've sort of been trying to change it up. I am still doing the three live streams a week with Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Again, Instagram, I do live streams in the mornings. Wednesday, I'm doing these Facebook live streams in the middle of the day. And then Thursday, I do my YouTube live streams that sort of expand on this particular topic. So tomorrow I'm going to be talking about a little bit about performance and muscle symmetry, whereas today I'm going to focus on why it's important to focus on muscle symmetry. And I'll discuss in detail as to what that means and how it relates to different, not only, just your physique, but also to different aspects of your body. So it's very important to developing a balanced physique. And I know this topic kind of sounds like, kind of would sound like an individual who's already sort of into weightlifting or is already existing into, already at that point where they're sort of getting closer to their goals or they're reaching their goals as far as, building the proper physique and things of that nature. However, this can be important to keep in mind, especially when you're starting. And it's going to help too later on down the road when you have a balanced sort of, when you're focusing on balanced workouts and a balanced physique is going to help you later on starting that sort of process now, because it's going to definitely prevent you from going into, injuries or anything of that nature. So let's go ahead and get started with discussing today's topic. So as far as muscle symmetry, basically is all about focusing on an equal amount of training with each muscle group. I mentioned this multiple times with so many different, especially when I talk about exercises or when I'm performing exercises in my Tuesday live streams. I usually always mention to sort of make sure to focus on that balance, not only with your form, but when you're focusing, for example, if you're focusing on a particular exercise that sort of oscillates one side of the body, for example, you could do like a dumbbell roll. And when you're doing a dumbbell roll, usually, you've got your hand on the bench and you're focusing on one arm, rowing one arm up. So basically, with that exercise, it's oscillating this right side of the body. For example, I always usually start with the right side, but it's going to oscillate that right side of the body. And you also have to, whenever you complete that set of reps for the right side of the body, you have to do it on the left side of the body to create that symmetry between both of the muscles. So you got to be aware of that when you're doing oscillated based exercises. Make sure that you're balancing out your workouts, and that's what I'm, going to explain a little bit about why this is important. So one thing is to note that complete symmetry may not always be achievable due to genetic factors, natural asymmetries in the body, or specific training goals. So, nonetheless, focusing on balanced muscle development and addressing any noticeable imbalances can help maximize the benefits, like I'd mentioned previously, or what was mentioned, you know, what I have been mentioning, I guess I should say. So, with everything that we've discussed so far, what's mentioned previously as far as exactly why it's important to sort of focus on muscle symmetry and how it is important overall to develop not only that balanced physique, but also to focus on sort of your performance and being able to, sort of stay strong and stay balanced in your workouts, because it's going to affect, if you have any type of injuries or anything of that sort. What I want to sort of first talk about before I move on into sort of the various benefits as it relates to muscle symmetry is muscle imbalance, or muscle balance, I guess you could say. Start out. So basically, what muscle balance is when all muscles surrounding a joint have an optimal length tension relationship, allowing the joint to rest in a neutral position. So That's basically saying that the joint is able to rest in the proper position in a even and equal position for that particular muscle. When you have a muscle imbalance, you have a muscle that is basically has an altered length tension relationship where you may have one muscle that can be completely straight and be balanced, and then the other muscle would sort of deviate in a certain way. So there's different, if you're mainly what results in that again is if you're not training properly, maybe you're not doing form correctly, things of that nature can sort of make that affect or impact you in that way when it comes to muscle symmetry. So sort of keep that in mind. Um, again, it's all it's like I just sort of mentioned. It's not possible to have complete symmetry of the muscles. So you keep that in mind that you're going to have natural asymmetries. But it's just important on your part, what you're doing on your part, physically when you're exercising, to be aware, to focus on balancing those muscles as close as possible. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the various benefits and what can sort of basically, what basically the muscle symmetry contributes to, what it helps with. So, of course, it's going to help with the aesthetic appeal of the muscles. So, symmetrical muscles are often considered visually pleasing. Balanced development and proportion between muscles on both sides of the body contribute to an overall harmonious physique. Many people strive for symmetry to enhance their appearance and achieve a well-rounded athletic look. So, again, having that balance, when doing specific exercises. If you're doing a certain type of training split, whether it be back and biceps or chest and triceps, sort of do an equal amount of exercises targeting specific muscles. You know, for example, like when I was talking about yesterday when I was doing sort of chest workouts, make sure that you're balancing out how you're working out your chest. So maybe you want to try one exercise that focuses on your inner chest, maybe your mid chest or your outer chest. So sort of creating that, focusing on, those three exercises and helping to develop the chest, that creates that even and symmetrical look. So there's different various exercises that you can do that sort of target specific muscles. Like, for example, with your leg muscles, you have a ton of muscles in your legs that include your glutes, your hamstrings, anything of that sort, as well as your, um, it's going blank on me, as well as your quads. That's what it is. They're your quads. I couldn't think of it for a second. But your quads, glutes, and hamstrings, as well as your calves, those are all kind of part of your legs. So with those, you could sort of balance out your workouts, doing primarily focusing on maybe your glutes with one exercise, your hamstrings with one exercise, your quads with one exercise. And again, something to keep in mind too when you're doing exercises that are focusing on this, you're focusing on that symmetry. Keep in mind that some exercises that even though you're targeting a specific muscle, other muscles are going to be worked together, and that goes along with sort of the natural asymmetry of the body. You can't exactly get that full, complete symmetry. It's not going to be possible, but you can get close by focusing on, targeting these specific muscles in a specific workout, and that's what I'm trying to sort of get across there. So injury prevention, I've mentioned this multiple times in the past, especially with muscle imbalances, is that it's important when you have symmetrical muscles. It's going to help to, when you have that balance, it's going to basically have that, you'll have a huge amount of prevention towards any type of injury. So when muscles are imbalanced, with some being significantly stronger or larger than their counterparts, it can lead to biomechanical imbalances and compensatory movements. So basically movements that, improper movements. So these imbalances increase the risk of strain, overuse injuries, postural problems. Symmetrical muscles promote better alignment and reduce the likelihood of such issues. So not only is that muscle symmetry and focusing on having a balanced sort of workout regimen and routine important. It's also, or not just for that aesthetic appeal, but it's also important for sort of the prevention of injury. Again, this goes into what I've talked about in the past a lot with a lot of my clients and sort of the program that I focus on is when you get started with a program with me, I usually try to focus on sort of creating the basic or focusing on creating those basic movement patterns, mastering those basic movement patterns and creating that sort of sense of movement, that proper sense of movement, and so that you can be able to move on to more, heavier exercises and more high impact exercise. So that's the important part is with me, I always try to focus on, okay, we need to master these basic movement patterns of various different types of exercises, whether it be using body weight or lot weight exercises. That's going to help you with leading you to that muscle symmetry down the road. So when you're getting to these other exercises, you're focusing on that proper form and having that proper, alignment, and you're being aware of your posture when you're doing those workouts. So that's another thing to keep in mind is that's really a big thing I focus on is mastering those basic movement patterns. And then when you move on to another, set of workouts, going into the next phase, you can be able to do those types of workouts when they're added with weights and any other variations of exercises. So that's something that I really focus on. So functional performance is another benefit as it relates to focusing on muscle symmetry and muscle balances. So balanced muscle development enhances functional performance in various physical activities. Symmetrical muscles contribute to better coordination, stability, and overall body control. When muscles on both sides of the body are equally developed, they can work together more efficiently, improving movement efficiency and reducing the risk of muscle imbalances during activities such as sports, weightlifting, or everyday tasks. So I'm going to sort of expand on this a little bit tomorrow as it relates to performance with sort of muscle symmetry. But symmetrical muscles are really going to help with that better coordination. And your muscles are going to be balanced, so you're going to be able to be aware of, if you're doing a certain sports activity, your muscles are going to react the proper way. You're going to have that stability and that overall body control. And again, I'm going to expand on the performance aspect of it tomorrow, but that's something to keep in mind is that it's going to enhance a lot of your functional performance in various activities that you do in your day-to-day life, not only in sports, but just everyday tasks as well. Strength and power. So symmetrical muscle development can improve overall strength and power output when both sides of the body have similar muscle mass and strength. They can generate force more effectively. So this balance allows for greater stability and power transfer through movements, leading to improved performance in activities that require strength and explosiveness. Now, strength is another thing, and power is another thing. So I'm not really went into power as often, but there is a difference between strength and power. Strength is primarily focused on basically being able to lift something, being able to, it doesn't have to be in a fast paced motion, but being able to sort of have the endurance to lift maybe a weight or anything of that nature. Whereas power is completely opposite in that it focuses on generating force. So this is focusing more on speed and quickness. So example, when you go into, a particular sport, being able to throw a ball or anything of that sort, you're going to generate those movements more efficiently, is what that means. When you're talking about, you're going to have that balance between strength and power. So you're going to have that strength to, being able to lift things properly, being able to sort of have that muscle mass to and strength to lift, but you're also going to be able to generate more force effectively if you're throwing something or you're doing an activity that requires a little bit more endurance and a little bit more sort of that power and explosiveness. So sort of keep that in mind that strength and power are different. Strength is focusing on being able to have the ability to lift something that is heavy, something to that effect. It doesn't really focus on how fast you're doing something. Power is focusing on that explosiveness, that quickness of producing force. So keep those two in mind, but it's going to create a balance between both strength and power. That's basically what I'm trying to sum up here with that muscle symmetry. It's creating the balance between the two. Another thing is this sort of goes back into what I talked about with muscle balances and imbalances. A lot of this stuff too, it does kind of relay back, but that's something to keep in mind that these are important. These are important things to keep in mind with anything related to muscle symmetry. So symmetry in muscle development contributes to better posture and alignment. Muscles that are proportionally developed help maintain posture, proper spinal alignment, reducing muscle imbalances that can lead to postural deviations and promote good body mechanics. So this can minimize the risk of chronic pain, improve your spinal health, and enhance overall body alignment. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Yes, it's helping to improve with those muscle imbalances and having that injury prevention, but it's also helping with the alignment of your body and your posture. So having that is going to reduce that risk of, getting chronic pain from any particular movements. It's improving your spine. It's improving that posture with your daily movements, your spine. That's important to sort of keep proper posture there. And it's just enhancing that overall body alignment. When you're focusing on a balanced symmetry with your muscles, it's going to help with so many different aspects beyond, just that particular muscle balance and that sort of injury prevention. Is focusing on the chronic pain, the spinal health, and just your alignment of your body overall. So sort of keep that in mind because that's very important. Alrighty guys, so that's all I pretty much have for you guys today. Again, I really appreciate you guys for watching, and what I'm trying to focus on with this is sort of show you how, muscle symmetry and muscle balance is important because of not only focusing on the aesthetic appeal, but that injury prevention, that alignment of the body, being able to have the balance between strength and power. These are all important aspects to sort of keep in mind. And again, like I mentioned at the beginning, this isn't a topic that is just focused on, people who are already lifting. This is really great for anybody new because being aware of muscle symmetry when you start out is definitely going to help you down the road when you're going into, more of these heavier lifting. If you're getting into more heavy lifting or anything of that nature, it's going to help you down the road and sort of prevent that injury. Your body's going to be properly aligned. You're going to be able to perform, proper form and movement with various exercises when you're focusing on this, especially starting out. And like I mentioned before, that's a big thing with my program is I focus on, mastering the basic movement patterns and then moving on to those more endurance-based exercises, and just sort of progressing from there. It's all about, sort of progression. Start with the basics and then move up gradually and then gradually work up so that you're able to get into, that muscular development phase and that maximal strength phase of sort of your workouts. So that's what I wanted to talk about today is just basically explain to you guys how important muscle symmetry is, not only just for the aesthetics, but for your overall performance. And again, tomorrow I'm going to sort of expand on this topic a little bit more and talk about specifically how it contributes to your performance when you focus on muscle symmetry. So definitely watch out for that. That'll actually be on YouTube tomorrow at the same time. You can also reach out to me if you have questions about anything I discussed today. My number is here on the screen, and then I've also got my email if you want to reach out to me via email, or you can also direct message me here on Facebook as well. So keep that in mind. But with all that being said, guys, that's all I have for you today. I hope you find this valuable, and I hope that it helps you sort of give you an idea on the importance of muscle symmetry, because this is probably a topic that you don't really hear about as it relates to fitness. So I want to give you guys something a little bit different and give you some more information that you can take with you and sort of think about when you're doing exercises and focusing on sort of that symmetry of the muscles. So thank you guys again, and I will see you guys tomorrow if you show up on the YouTube live stream. But other than that, I'll see you guys next week in the upcoming live streams that I'll have on Tuesday and Wednesday, as well as Thursday. So thank you guys.